A workplace does not need to insult you every day to damage you. Sometimes all it has to do is keep the targets moving, make every request feel urgent, praise your availability, punish your boundaries, bury you under work no one measures, and then call your exhaustion a personal problem. That is the trick. The system creates the pressure, then sells you resilience as if your nervous system is the defective part. This is not a video about breathing through disrespect or becoming a calmer version of someone being overused. This is about the 15 things you must do to protect your mental health at work before the job trains you to call your own deterioration professionalism. The first thing you must do is stop treating your stress like a personality flaw. Half the office is walking around treating their own distress as a confession. I'm too sensitive. I'm not cut out for fast-paced environments. I just need thicker skin. I should be lucky to even have a seat at the table. These are not insights. These are the company's lines repeated back to itself in a private voice. Stress at work is often a signal, not a defect. It can mean the role was scoped for 2 people and assigned to 1. It can mean your manager is passing his anxiety down the chain like a tax. It can mean the deadline was set to look ambitious in a slide deck and nobody costed out who would actually do the work. Healthy pressure has a beginning, a reason, support around it, and an end. Chronic workplace stress has none of those, and somehow it is always your job to absorb it. You can handle hard work when expectations are clear. You can handle urgency when not every request is treated like a fire. You can handle critical feedback when it isn't humiliation wearing the costume of coaching. The breakdown begins when every structural failure becomes a personal improvement project for you. Before you blame your brain, look at the environment that keeps putting your brain under threat. The second thing is to identify the exact mechanism that is damaging you. Hating your job is emotionally honest. It is also strategically useless. You need specifics, the kind of specifics you would write down if a labor attorney asked you what was actually wrong. The workload may be engineered for failure, with a stretch assignment that became permanent and a head count nobody updated. The manager may run hot one week and absent the next, leaving you to read his mood like a weather report you cannot actually see. The role may have been sold in the interview as 1 job and operated as 3. You may be making decisions you do not have the authority to make, then absorbing the blame when they go sideways. You may be 20% underpaid for the scope, and you know it because you saw the recruiter's pitch to your potential replacement on LinkedIn. You may be locked into the job by health insurance, a green card sponsorship, a mortgage, or 2 kids in daycare. You may be micromanaged on details and abandoned on direction. You may be criticized in front of peers and praised in private, which is a deliberate technique, not a personality quirk. You may be kept available after hours by a Slack culture that punishes anyone who logs off first. Each problem has a different counter. Workload damage is met with documentation and forced prioritization. A bullying manager is met with evidence, a paper trail, and a working exit plan. Vague expectations are met with written clarification. After-hours intrusion is met with slow, deliberate retraining of the people who keep ignoring it. A manager who breaks people on purpose is rarely fixed by you communicating better. A vague enemy keeps you confused. A named enemy gives you a strategy. The third thing is to build a workload reality check. American corporate culture survives on an unspoken bargain. The company sets a workload that cannot be done in the contracted hours, and the employee absorbs the gap by skipping lunch, answering emails at midnight, and working through the holidays. The company gets the labor for free. The employee gets to call the gap normal. Track every task you actually do for 2 weeks, not the job description version, the real version. What got assigned, how long it took, what showed up after the assignment was already at capacity, what you did at home, what you finished by reorganizing your weekend. Convert the feeling of overload into a record. A manager can dismiss the line, "I feel overwhelmed." He cannot dismiss a numbered list of deliverables, time estimates, and overlapping deadlines. So when the next request lands in your inbox, the move is not to refuse. It is to force the prioritization conversation he was hoping to skip. I currently have 5 deliverables due Friday. Based on the time required, 2 of them fit in the available hours. Which 2 should I prioritize, and which 3 are getting moved? That sentence is not insubordination. It is project management. The only thing it changes is who has to do the math. Protecting your mental health sometimes starts with making invisible overload visible to the person who manufactured it. The fourth thing is to stop letting manufactured urgency become your operating system. A lot of companies run on synthetic panic because the actual planning never happened. The leadership team did not decide what to focus on 6 months ago, so on Thursday afternoon at 4:47, every project becomes critical, and your weekend becomes someone else's contingency. This is not a small annoyance. It is a slow injury. When your body lives in a low alarm state for years, it stops separating an executive's bad mood from a real emergency. Sleep thins, patience thins, the capacity to enjoy your own evenings thins. Start interrogating urgency the way a project manager would, not the way a frightened employee would. Who declared this urgent? What changed in the last 6 hours that wasn't already true yesterday? What happens if it ships Monday morning instead of tonight? Is this a real deadline, or is it a senior person's anxiety borrowing your weekend? Then put it in writing. Is this needed today, or is tomorrow morning acceptable? Which existing task should I deprioritize to handle this? Is this the new top priority over the deadline you gave me Tuesday? Not every urgent message is an emergency. Plenty of them are bad planning wearing a siren. The fifth thing is to put your boundaries in writing before you actually need them. Most people try to set a boundary in the moment after they are already cornered, exhausted, and 3 Slack messages past the line. The result is an outburst, which the workplace then files under attitude problem instead of reasonable request. Build the boundary in flat, professional language while you are calm. I am available for work communication between 9 and 5. I can review this tomorrow during work hours. I am at capacity today. This can be added once we reprioritize current work. I am not able to respond to non-urgent messages after hours. None of those sentences need to be defended. They just need to be repeated in the same tone until the pattern sticks. Boundaries are not announcements, they are habits. The goal is not to convince anyone that you have earned rest. The goal is to stop training the people around you to expect that you will absorb every overflow. The advice has to be honest about who can use it. Workers on probation, on a visa, on commission, on a PIP, in retaliation-heavy industries, or one paycheck from a missed rent payment cannot necessarily set hard boundaries without consequences. So think in tiers. There is the soft version where after-hours replies just slow down. There is the clarifying version where every request triggers a priority question. There is the written version where verbal asks get confirmed by email. There is the escalation version where the manager or HR gets formally involved. There is the exit version where the response to the system is to leave it. A boundary you cannot enforce is just a wish. Start with the one you can actually hold. The sixth thing is to document patterns, not isolated incidents. People wait for one explosive event before they begin keeping records. The damage in most American workplaces does not arrive as an explosion. It arrives as a pattern, any single piece of which is deniable. Public correction in stand-ups, last-minute deadline changes, information your peers receive that somehow misses your inbox, a workload 20% heavier than the person sitting next to you with no explanation, praise in private, criticism in front of the team, retaliation that arrives as a project assignment instead of a memo, different rules for the favored employees and different rules for you. One incident is a misunderstanding on paper. A pattern is a record. Keep dated notes. Save relevant emails or records in a way that follows company policy, and keep your own dated notes outside company systems when appropriate. Confirm verbal instructions with a short follow-up email, the kind that ends with, just to confirm what we agreed. Note who else was in the room. Note exact wording when you can. Follow your company's policy and your local laws, especially around recordings. Recording laws vary by state and by country, and recording without consent is a crime in many of them. Stay inside the law. Your memory is not weak. Your memory is being attacked by chronic stress, by gaslighting, and by a rolling pile of new tasks designed to pull your attention off the last fight. Documentation protects the truth from being rewritten by the people who benefit from rewriting it. The seventh thing is to separate your identity from your job performance. American corporate culture is unusually aggressive about this. The company calls itself a family. The Slack channel celebrates the people who answer at midnight. The annual review treats your output as evidence of your character. The all hands talks about commitment and mission as if you signed a vow instead of an offer letter. None of this is accidental. The deeper your identity is hooked into the company, the cheaper it is to control you. When you believe a missed deadline is proof you are a failure, that your manager's irritation is a verdict on your worth, that not getting promoted on schedule means you are falling behind in life, the company has been handed leverage it did not pay for. A bad quarter does not feel disappointing inside that frame. It feels existential. A 2-line Slack message from the wrong person can ruin a Saturday. The protection is to keep a self that the company does not own. Friendships built outside the org chart, hobbies with no productivity attached to them, a personal goal track that has nothing to do with anyone's roadmap, skills you can take with you when you leave, because eventually you will leave, by your choice or someone else's. The more your identity depends on one workplace approving of you, the easier it becomes for that workplace to use the threat of disapproval as a tool. The eighth thing is to learn the difference between feedback and erosion. People need feedback, real feedback, the kind that points to a specific output, names a specific change, gives a specific timeline, and applies the same standard to everyone in the room. That is not the problem. The problem is the version of feedback that is humiliation rebranded as development. Real feedback sounds like, "This report needs source data and a tighter executive summary. Please send a revised draft by Thursday at noon." Erosion sounds like, "You are not really showing up like someone who wants to grow here," with no example, no behavior named, and no clear way to satisfy the complaint. Real feedback gives you a finish line. Erosion is built without one on purpose. When the feedback feels off, force it into measurable terms. What specifically needs to change? What does success look like? Can I have one example from the last month? What is the deadline? Is this a performance issue or a preference issue? Is this standard being applied to everyone or just to me? These are not insubordinate questions. They are clarifying ones, and they expose whether the feedback is real or political. Feedback gives you a path. Erosion gives you a treadmill. The ninth thing is to protect your recovery time as if it were part of the job, because functionally it is. Most American office workers technically leave the building, then carry the building home in their head. They reread the email they sent. They check the channel during dinner. They draft tomorrow's response while putting the kids to bed. They fall asleep doing executive function for free. Recovery is not laziness. Recovery is how the body returns to a working baseline. Without it, stress does not reset overnight. It accumulates, and the new baseline becomes the old peak. After 2 years of that, a person does not remember what calm felt like. In practice, recovery is a set of small, deliberate cuts. Close the laptop fully, not into sleep mode. Write tomorrow's first task in a notebook before you leave so the brain stops carrying it for free. Turn off non-essential notifications outside work hours. Change clothes when you walk in the door so the body has a marker that the workday is over. Take a real walk outside, not a coffee run. Don't read work messages from bed. Build the transition ritual, even a small one, that draws a line between the workday and the rest of your life. Hold at least one part of the evening untouched by the job. None of this fixes a damaging manager. None of it fixes understaffing. None of it turns a bad workplace into a good one. It only reduces how much of the workplace you are smuggling into the parts of life that are still yours. If work takes your day and then takes over your evening, you are not resting. You are storing the same stress in a different room. The 10th thing is to build a private support system that lives outside the workplace. A damaging environment becomes much more powerful when it is the only place where you process reality. If your only sounding boards are coworkers who are also scared, also trapped, also dependent on the same paycheck, your judgment will drift in a direction that flatters management without your noticing. You need outside reference points, friends who do not work at the company, family who can hear what is going on without an agenda, a therapist if you can access one, a mentor in your industry who works somewhere else, a peer who left your company 2 years ago and remembers what was normal there. The point is reality testing. Sometimes you need someone outside the system to say, no, that is not normal. No, you are not overreacting. Yes, that sounds like retaliation under another name. No, that workload would not be acceptable in any well-run shop. Yes, you should be planning your exit. Be careful where you vent. Do not unload on coworkers who report to your manager or who are calculating their own promotion path. Do not process serious workplace conflict with anyone who has financial reasons to stay aligned with leadership. Do not confuse the person you eat lunch with for the person who would protect you if they were ever asked to choose. The workplace that may be damaging you should not be the only place where you are allowed to ask whether you are being damaged. The 11th thing is to use the company's wellness resources strategically without confusing them for protection. Most American employers now offer some version of an employee assistance program, a meditation app subscription, a few mental health webinars, a resilience training, and an anonymous engagement survey. Some of these can be useful. None of them are structural protection. An EAP can give you a few free sessions to talk through stress. It will not reduce your workload. A meditation app can calm your physiology. It will not stop a manager from running you down in front of peers. A webinar on resilience will not fix a department that has been understaffed for 3 years. A pulse survey will not protect you from retaliation if your responses are traceable, and you should never assume they aren't. Use the resources, but ask the questions you would ask of any service. Is this confidential? Who actually receives this information? What are the legal limits of privacy? Is participation tracked? Does this resource create documentation that could later support a leave request, an accommodation, or a complaint? HR is not your therapist, and HR is not the enemy. HR's job is tied to the organization, which means HR can sometimes help and sometimes will protect the company first because that is what HR is paid to do. Understand the function before you disclose anything sensitive. Use the resources. Just don't mistake a wellness brochure for a shield. The 12th thing is to watch for the early signs that work is changing you and to take them seriously the first time, not the 10th. Most people wait until they collapse before they admit something is wrong. The early warnings show up much sooner. The first email of the morning produces a stomach drop. The inbox starts to feel like a threat instead of a tool. Anger that was never part of your personality is now your default reaction at home. You are flatter than you used to be, less interested in things that used to matter, sleeping worse, snapping at people you love. You are using alcohol or food or doom scrolling to come down from work, not because you enjoy them, but because the body needs a release valve. You catch yourself thinking that one mistake will end your career, when objectively it would not. These are not diagnoses, they are accurate warnings. Track them honestly for 2 weeks. Note what triggers them. Reduce unnecessary exposure where you can. If symptoms persist or get worse, talk to a qualified mental health professional. Consider medical leave or workplace accommodations if your situation supports it. Build an exit plan if the environment is consistently making you worse. If at any point you are experiencing severe distress, persistent hopelessness, or thoughts of harming yourself, get immediate professional support. That is not weakness. That is the only correct response to a body and mind in real crisis. The body resigns long before the employee does. Don't wait until your body has to scream because you ignored every smaller signal it sent first. The 13th thing is to stop over-explaining your humanity to people who benefit from ignoring it. A lot of workers operate as if a damaging manager will eventually be moved by sufficiently detailed pain. They explain why they are tired. They explain why the deadline is unreasonable. They explain why constant after-hours messages are eroding their family life. They explain why public criticism is humiliating in front of peers. They explain why they need support. In a healthy environment, that explanation gets a real response. In a dysfunctional one, every explanation is a tax the employee keeps paying. The workplace receives more emotional information, nothing operational changes. So move from emotional pleading to operational clarity. Instead of, I am completely overwhelmed and I have been trying so hard, try, to meet the Friday deadline, I need an extension, support from another team member, or one existing task removed from my list. Which option do you prefer? Instead of, I feel like I am always expected to answer at night and it is affecting me, try, I will respond to non-urgent messages during business hours. Urgent items should be flagged with the word urgent in the subject line so I can triage them. That is not cold. That is protective. Pleas can be denied. Constraints have to be answered. Some workplaces do not respond to your suffering. They only respond to the architecture of what you are willing to do. The 14th thing is to recognize the point at which the actual mental health strategy is to leave. Most workplace mental health content avoids this answer because it does not poll well in HR slide decks. The reality is simpler. There are environments that no amount of personal coping will fix, and continuing to apply coping skills inside them is not strength, it is delay. What leaving means here is a plan, not a tantrum. The signs that exit planning has become the move are recognizable. The environment is consistently degrading your health. Leadership denies obvious problems when raised in writing. Retaliation arrives, sometimes as cold shouldering, sometimes as a project reassignment, sometimes as a sudden reorganization that puts you under someone hostile. Workload remains impossible after multiple clarifications. You are being targeted by a manager who picks one person per cycle and grinds them down. Your body now reacts physically before you walk into the building. You no longer recognize the version of yourself you have become at this job. Internal channels have been used and nothing changed. The company keeps offering coping tools while protecting the system that makes coping necessary. An exit plan is logistical work, not emotional venting. Update the resume on a personal device. Reconnect with the network you let go cold while you were drowning. Save money where you can. Document achievements while you can still see them clearly before the company narrative makes them feel small. Save non-confidential work samples only where company policy explicitly allows. Build a marketable skill outside business hours. Apply before desperation peaks, because desperation is a terrible negotiator. Understand notice periods, healthcare gaps, COBRA if it applies to you, severance norms in your industry, and the financial risk of a gap month before you sign anything new. Leaving is not failure. Staying is not always strength. Sometimes the strongest thing a person does is stop negotiating with a place that has already shown what it is. The 15th thing is to refuse to let work become the only life you are running. Work becomes psychologically dangerous when it eats the entire architecture of a person's day. Wake up for work, commute for work, perform for work, decompress from work, worry about work, sleep poorly because of work. Repeat. When the job is the center of everything, even small disturbances become existential. A two-line message from your manager feels like a survival event. A bad meeting flattens an entire weekend. The manager's irritation on Tuesday becomes the silence at your dinner table on Wednesday. A performance review starts to read like a verdict on whether you are a worthwhile human being. Rebuild a life outside the job, not for show, but as leverage. Real friendships that have nothing to do with your team. Physical movement built into the week. Sleep that is not interrupted by tomorrow's email. Financial planning that gives you options if the job ends suddenly, because at-will employment means it can. Skill building that is not tied to your current employer's tech stack. A creative outlet you do not monetize. Time with people who knew you before this job existed. Community attachments that do not run through Slack. This gives you the one thing most workplaces do not want you to have. Real options. When the job is your entire life, the job owns your nervous system and you negotiate from fear. When the job is one part of a larger life, you can see it for what it is. You can negotiate from a different position, and you can leave when leaving is the right answer. The smaller your life is outside work, the bigger every workplace problem becomes inside your head. Protecting your mental health at work is not the same as becoming numb. Real protection is not about smiling through disrespect, training yourself to tolerate conditions that should never have been normalized, or becoming so unreactive that nothing reaches you. The version of resilience where nothing reaches you is not strength. It is dissociation, and the company will accept it from you for years before it ever asks whether you are okay. Real protection is awareness, boundaries, documentation, recovery, support, strategy, and sometimes exit. It is being honest about what is happening to you. It is naming the source of the damage. It is making invisible overload visible to the person who created it. It is refusing to accept manufactured urgency as your default state. It is keeping a life outside the job large enough to absorb the job's worst weeks. A workplace does not have to be openly abusive to break you. It only has to be chaotic enough, demanding enough, vague enough, understaffed enough, manipulative enough, and indifferent enough that you start abandoning yourself in pieces to stay in good standing. That is the line you cannot afford to cross, not for a paycheck, a title, or a promotion approved by a manager who would replace you within a week if it suited the quarter. Your job can rent your time. It does not get to own your mind.